I'm Paul Bowden-Laws.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast with our AccuWeather meteorologist Steve Williams. Partly sunny, cooler, less humid, I'm sure Steve would say. Nicest day of the week, high 75. Partly cloudy and 60 overnight. 67 at O'Hare. Next news, 7:30, Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560 The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. President Biden saying that he's not ready to impose a federal vaccine mandate, but he certainly hopes that state and local units of government will.
Push for vaccine mandates in states, private companies, schools. Do you want to see those entities pass vaccine mandates?
Well, I'd like to see them continue to move in that direction, and that's why I pointed out. I had asked the Justice Department to determine whether they're able to do that legally. And they can. Local communities can do that. Local businesses can do that. It's still a question whether the federal government can mandate the whole country. I don't know that yet.
Oh, so don't hold your breath.
So that's the direction we're going. It's the same with masks. He certainly hopes that state and local units of government, private companies, mandate masks too. Not the booster shot yet, not yet, which is consistent with what Fauci said, runs afoul of what Pfizer originally said. But with respect to masks, yeah, absolutely.
Mr. President, people still need to mask up. Mr. President,
how long do you think it might be necessary to wear a mask, and at what point do you think people might have to have a booster shot?
I said in my talk, the booster shot is not needed now. It is possible that it'll be needed later. I don't know. The science hasn't dictated that yet. And the first part of your question?
I think people might have to wear a mask again.
Well, if you notice, a lot of places people don't have to wear masks. Let's get that straight. The places where people have gotten vaccinated, where we have a high vaccination rate, people do not have to wear masks at all. Like some of you were with me yesterday when I was up in Lehigh Valley. Didn't have to wear masks there. Don't have to mask if you come home to Delaware with me. I know you love doing that. But you don't have to wear a mask. The places people are probably going to have to wear masks in those communities where the high rate of unvaccinated stays high and they don't move. They don't move to getting vaccinated.
You know, it's interesting. People are going to probably have to move to wear masks. I thought it was a CDC guideline.
Right.
Why not defer to state and locals like you are with respect to vaccines? Well, that's up to the state and locals to decide. That's not what he said. In addition to that, what he did say is sui generis. That is not what CDC said. No. CDC made no mention of their mask guidance as based on community infection rates, which Joe Biden just sort of off the cuff said would be the determining factor as to whether the mask mandate might be imposed or not. And so it goes. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Bret Baier. Of course, he's the host of Fox News Special Report, 5 p.m. Chicago time, Monday through Friday. Bret, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
good morning.
Good morning. Your colleague, Peter Doocy, tried to get more clarity on the reversal by the CDC and by extension the Biden administration on mask wearing, and all he got was a variant came along, and that's essentially the argument for these vaccine mandates that are being proposed, soft or more stringent as well. Where do you think this goes?
I think it's a real policy back and forth that we're getting into here, and there's going to be pushback. in different places, in different communities, and different people. When you start getting into mandates, it's a different ball game. I think there's a lot of people that feel like, yes, we're all in this together trying to fight the virus, but there are still personal decisions that have to be made between you and your doctor. And I think that there's a lot of questions to be asked about the hard data that supports or doesn't these decisions. So tonight we're going to have the CDC Director, Dr. Walensky, on special report for an extended conversation, and we're hoping to get people to send in social media questions, whether they're on video or just on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, and spend the time to get into the details about some of these decisions, which are major decisions for a country that's just been through 18 months of pandemic weariness.
Yeah, and ask her too. I mean, how can anybody trust the CDC anymore when they flip-flop so many times about masks and about a variety of things?
Yeah, I think that there's the messaging here has been really rough, and I think if you look at the numbers right now, not to give too many of my questions away, but the numbers of the breakthrough cases number roughly in the 6,000 range, and this is above, of roughly, almost 200 million people who have been vaccinated at least one shot. And of those, the deaths are single digits, and hospitalizations are really low. So if you look at the percentages, it's something like 0.0005%. And if you look at the seasonal flu, which, by the way, we haven't seen really much any of at all, the hospitalization and death rate is at about 0.1. So we're doing a lot to obviously protect the unvaccinated, but for vaccinated people, the numbers are still really rare.
Yeah, so many questions for Dr. Walensky. I mean, and to your point, you sort of were intimating it at your first comment, which is why won't the CDC show its work? Why are they not making the studies available that they use to base their reversal on mask guidance?
I think that's the number one question. And that's the one when you ask Admiral Bret Baier, who was on the task force, if you ask some of our doctors like Marty McCary or Dr. Mark Siegel, all of them say the same thing. Listen, we're game. You just need to lay it out for us, and they have not done that yet.
One of the other things that only you can do because, you're uniquely positioned in the D.C. press corps, is, there are other doctors that have real credentials. You just mentioned a couple of them that are part of your program, that experts you rely on, that are suggesting something very different, that maybe the CDC has 180 degrees wrong. And I know these are now outlaw doctors because they're not hewing to the orthodoxy. But Dr. Robert Malone, who's credited as one of the inventors of the mRNA technology, he essentially suggested, based on the data that we're seeing and the reporting on it, that what may be happening is antibody-dependent enhancement, which is, as the vaccine enhances, as I should say, as the vaccine wanes, it actually enhances the virus's ability to replicate. He suggests that if that is what's happening, based on the data, that we should be stopping the vaccination campaign because it's actually exacerbating the problem. And it'd just be nice to hear like somebody say, well, this is happening, these conversations or these opinions are happening in a silo. So tell me Dr. Robert Malone is wrong, fine, but then explain your position against the backdrop of, or against the assertion of somebody who is, equally credentialed in this space.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, too. I think that, there's a lot of people looking at this and saying that there's more about politics, there's more about control, there's more about all this other stuff. And I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt that these scientists who've spent their life in this career are really trying to save people's lives. I think that's a place where we should start in good faith. But that doesn't mean that we can't be skeptical, or it doesn't mean that we can't ask hard questions. So I think we're going to allot a lot of time to it, and hopefully it'll be illuminating in one way or another.
Well, new information this morning from the CDC that, this Delta variant is now, more contagious than the chicken pox. What's the science and data behind that? Why didn't they know that, months ago? Because the Delta variant has been around for a long time.
Yeah, and it was in Great Britain before us.
Yeah, India.
And there was all kinds of different indications. I don't know the answer to that question. I think that, some of these discoveries and this evolving kind of public policy is hurtful because the messaging gets in the way. And they keep on saying they're not flip-flopping. But, boy, when you go out and you say something definitive and then, 3 months later you're doing something completely opposite, it's tough to run a public policy operation like that.
Well, right, and you have former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb saying the Delta variant will probably run its course in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and so then are we going to be on to the Epsilon variant and the Gamma variant, and are we going to be in this merry-go-round in perpetuity? I mean, based on the spread, and as you were pointing out, versus the hospitalization and mortality rate. It seems to me Holman Jenkins had a good piece earlier this week in the Wall Street Journal on the topic, and he basically said, look, we made this choice in the beginning, and we're remaking the same wrong choice right now, which is, do we try to control everyone's exposure, or do we try to control the exposure for those that are most vulnerable? You cannot control the exposure for 330 million people. You cannot stop the spread, and it was never advertised as stopping the spread, at least not initially. It was slow the spread. It was don't overwhelm the healthcare system, and somehow, speaking of mutations, that mutated into we're going to eliminate the existence of COVID, which is from the experts that we talk to, I assume you talk to, some of the same ones, is a medical impossibility.
Yeah, I think it's an important point. I mean, it was slow the spread. Bring the curve down, remember? So our
flatten the curve, yeah.
Flatten the curve so our medical teams in the hospitals can deal with it. Well, they can deal with it because they're not overflowing. The numbers of vaccinated people, as I mentioned, are minuscule, very rare. Now, can you carry the virus? Yes, you can. And so that threat, they say, for a vaccinated person to carry the virus in their nose and then give it to an unvaccinated person, thereby it gets the communities at risk. But at what point are we going to give, if you've had COVID before, some weight as well as the immunity that you have from that? And two, the hospitalization rate and death is really where we should be focused and not the percentage of cases. And those are things that I really want to get into with the CDC director.
I mean, this is going to be great. I'm glad you secured this interview. But and this may be partly a question for her, but probably more so a question for the politicians on the Hill. And I wonder if you've heard anything on this topic. I mean, is there talk among the members of Congress and the Biden administration officials about promoting the idea of returning to lockdowns?
Oh.
They won't get rid of that idea. They won't say it's not going to happen, which is, scary in and of itself. The president intimated that they're trying to avoid doing that, but just by even talking about it, it affects the economy and it affects the economic wherewithal. And then you start getting into the politics of things. I mean, is this all a setup to another big dump of money from Capitol Hill, and somehow they tie the $3.5 trillion human infrastructure project is somehow helping the economy in the post-second wave of COVID or fourth wave, whatever we're in. I think it's going to be a stretch, and I think that they need to worry about the policy pushback on the first part.
Where do you think this is coming from in the first place? It doesn't seem to me that there was a groundswell from the populace as to fear of the Delta variant like there was a fear of the unknown, last year, the spring of last year. It seems to me this is mainly media generated, and some politicians too, and it can only be in service to their very insular constituency, because it just doesn't seem to me that there is a hue and cry for federal or state and local action like we saw last year.
Yeah, I think there are a few examples of post-July 4th where communities in particular were taken down as far as the number of cases. There's a story about Cape Cod and an outbreak there. There's something in Missouri. And they looked at the transmissibility of the Delta variant as compared to the regular strain. And now the question is the severability, the severe nature of it, and whether people are getting sicker even if you're unvaccinated. And I don't think we've seen that data. And again, we haven't seen a lot of the data behind these decisions.
One other piece of data that's been bandied about, we don't really have a handle on it, but it'd be fascinating to hear what Dr. Walensky says, is what percentage of those we identify as in high-risk categories is unvaccinated? Because the supposition is that it's very small.
I think it's pretty small. I think we were getting up to 80 to 90% of our older population having been vaccinated. And of those, so for example, Israel has started booster shots for citizens over 60. Israel is a very small nation in comparison to the United States, but that's the way they're going, with a third Pfizer booster. I don't know if that's where we're going to go, but I think more concerning for example, members of the military or people in government is the mandate nature of a vaccine. We haven't really come to that point as a country. And I think, as you know, there's a lot of data that the vaccine is safe, and you know, hundreds of millions of people have taken it. But there are concerns about it from different quarters, and it's usually a decision between you and your doctor. And this is not that. And so it opens up a door and questions.
He is Bret Baier, Fox News anchor, special report, 5 p.m. Chicago time, weekdays. #1 best-selling author of 3 Days at the Brink, FDR's Daring Gamble to Win World War II, and the forthcoming To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant, The Fragile Union, and the Crisis of 1876. And tune in for his interview.